Chapter 1. Colliding Worlds. Adriana Moretti stepped lightly into the grand hall, her eyes scanning the crowd with careful precision. The chandeliers cast a warm glow over the polished marble floors, but the elegance did little to soften the tension that lingered in the air. She adjusted the delicate fabric of her gown and reminded herself to stay composed. Every step she took was measured, because in her world, a single misstep could ripple through the empire her father had built. Across the room, Luca Romano observed from a shadowed corner. He moved with quiet authority, his gaze sharp and calculating. Sent by his family to monitor the gathering, he had learned to blend into any environment, to become invisible while still seeing everything. Tonight, his mission was simple in theory, yet complicated by the unpredictable nature of the Moretti Empire. Their first encounter came unexpectedly. A heated argument erupted near the center of the hall. Voices rose, hands gestured, and Adriana instinctively stepped forward to intervene. Luca moved at the same moment. Their eyes met briefly, a spark of recognition passing between them even before they realized they were on the same side against a sudden threat. The chaos intensified when a group of strangers pushed into the gathering, their intentions unclear, but unmistakably dangerous. Adriana and Luca exchanged a quick glance, a silent agreement forming between them. Without words, they moved as a unit, their instincts guiding each other through the crowd. The sound of shattered glass and hurried footsteps surrounded them, but somehow, in that moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. Once the threat passed, Adriana found herself standing a little too close to Luca, her heart racing for reasons she did not fully understand. He studied her with a mixture of curiosity and respect, and for a brief moment, the weight of their family's rivalries felt distant. The air between them held a tension that was both thrilling and dangerous. Adriana forced herself to step back, smoothing the front of her gown. Luca offered a small nod, a gesture that carried more meaning than either of them would admit. In that instant, a fragile connection had been formed. Neither could predict where it would lead, but both sensed that this encounter was only the beginning of something that might change their lives forever. The night continued, filled with whispered conversations and the constant hum of vigilance. Adriana and Luca moved among the guests, aware of each other's presence in a way that made the bustling room feel strangely intimate. Though neither dared to speak of it aloud, a quiet understanding had taken root. They were from rival worlds, yet in the midst of danger. Their paths had collided in a way that neither could ignore. As the gathering drew to a close, Adriana slipped out into the cool night air, her thoughts tangled with images of sharp eyes and confident movements. Luca lingered behind, his mind replaying every detail of their encounter. Both understood the unspoken truth that lingered in the spaces between words. In a world ruled by power and fear, the briefest moments of connection could be the most dangerous force of all. Chapter 2. A dangerous alley in Seth City. Streets were slick with rain, reflecting the dim glow of streetlights as Adriana Moretti moved swiftly through the alleyways. Her mind replayed the events of the gathering, each encounter with Luca Romano etched sharply into her memory. She could not deny the pull she felt toward him, though she reminded herself constantly that he was part of the family she was sworn to oppose. Suddenly, a shout echoed from a nearby corner. Adriana's instincts fled, and she ducked behind a stack of crates just as a group of masked men appeared, moving with clear intent to harm. She had no time to react alone, and a familiar presence dropped beside her. Luca's hand brushed hers, and without a word, he guided her through the narrow passages, his movements fluid and precise. The strangers pursued them with relentless speed, but the city's maze-like streets seemed almost familiar to him. Adriana felt a surge of gratitude mixed with adrenaline as they narrowly avoided capture. Once they reached a secluded courtyard, they pressed themselves against a cold brick wall, breathing heavily. For a moment, the danger passed, and the silence between them was almost tangible. Adriana's pulse slowed, and she allowed herself a brief glance at Luca. There was a depth in his eyes that went beyond calculation and caution. She could see courage, loyalty, and an understanding that perhaps no one else could offer. "We need to move," Luca said quietly, his voice low but steady. "They won't give up so easily." Adriana nodded, though her hand lingered near his for just a heartbeat too long. Together, they planned their next steps, coordinating silently as they navigated the labyrinth of streets. Each shared glance and subtle touch strengthened an unspoken bond. Even in the midst of danger, there was a strange comfort in knowing that they were protecting each other. As dawn approached, the immediate threat finally faded into the distance. They paused on a quiet rooftop overlooking the city. The sky was painted with the first hints of morning, and Adriana could finally take a deep breath. "You're different than I expected," she admitted softly, her voice barely audible over the wind. Luca's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, the walls both of them had built around themselves seemed to falter. "And you," he said slowly, "are not what I thought either." Neither spoke again, but the weight of the moment lingered between them. In the chaos of a world filled with violence and loyalty, they had found something rare: mutual respect, trust, and the beginnings of understanding. Their alliance was forged in danger, but it carried the potential for something deeper. As they parted, each returned to their own family obligations, but the memory of the night's cooperation remained vivid. Both Adriana and Luca understood that their encounter had shifted something fundamental. They had survived together, and in that survival, they had discovered a connection neither could easily dismiss. The city around them remained perilous, but a seed of trust had been planted, one that promised both risk and possibility in equal measure. Chapter 3. Secrets and Confessions. Morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows of Adriana's private study, casting warm patterns across the polished wooden floor. She sat behind her desk, reviewing reports that detailed her father's empire, but her mind was elsewhere. Thoughts of Luca Romano kept surfacing, unbidden and persistent. His calm confidence, the way he had moved beside her through danger, lingered in her mind like an echo she could not ignore. Later that day, a chance meeting brought them together in the quiet of a secluded courtyard behind the city's old theatre. Neither had planned to see the other, yet both had come seeking a brief moment of reprieve from the constant vigilance demanded by their families. Adriana noticed the subtle tension in Luca's posture, the slight narrowing of his eyes as he surveyed the surroundings. "You could have stayed away," she said softly, though her voice betrayed more curiosity than admonition. "I could say the same to you," Luca replied, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. His gaze softened as it met hers, and for a moment, the weight of their family names seemed distant. They walked together, careful to maintain a comfortable distance, yet unable to ignore the unspoken pull between them. As they spoke, their conversation shifted from mundane pleasantries to small, revealing truths. Adriana admitted the pressure she felt to live up to her father's expectations and the loneliness that often accompanied her position. Luca shared glimpses of his own life, the constant scrutiny and the necessity of hiding vulnerability, a world that demanded strength. With every confession, the invisible walls surrounding them weakened. A subtle bond formed, one built on understanding and cautious trust. Adriana felt an unfamiliar warmth in his presence, a sense that she could be more than the dutiful daughter of a mafia don, even if only for a fleeting moment. Luca felt the same, as if in her company he could allow himself to hope that loyalty to his family did not have to mean isolation from the heart. A soft breeze stirred, carrying the scent of rain from the streets below. Adriana tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and looked away, suddenly aware of how close they had come to bridging the space between them. "We can't let anyone know," she said quietly, almost as a warning to herself. "No one would understand," Luca agreed, though his eyes lingered on hers with quiet intensity. "And yet, I feel like we understand each other more than anyone else ever could." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the city buzzing faintly around them. The danger of their world was never far from their minds, yet for the first time, they allowed themselves to imagine a connection that was entirely their own. Each knew that what they were feeling could be perilous, but the warmth of shared vulnerability was intoxicating. As they parted that day, There was a mutual awareness that their bond had grown stronger. They carried with them the memory of whispered confessions and stolen understanding, knowing that in a world dictated by power and loyalty, trust was the rarest currency of all. The connection between Adriana and Luca had deepened, subtle but undeniable, and the seed of something more than alliance had taken root in the spaces between them. Chapter 4. The first spark. The evening air was heavy with the scent of jasmine and rain-soaked streets as Adriana walked along the balcony of her father's estate. The city below gleamed with lights, but her thoughts were elsewhere, tangled around the memory of Luca Romano and the unexpected connection that had formed between them. She had told herself repeatedly that he was part of a rival family, that any feelings were dangerous. Yet her heart betrayed her with every stolen thought. Luca appeared at the far end of the balcony, a quiet presence that made her pulse quicken. "You always come out here when no one else does," he observed, his tone calm but curious. Adriana allowed herself a small smile. "I like the view. It reminds me that the world is bigger than the walls we live in." He stepped closer, and for a moment, the distance between them felt charged with unspoken emotions. Their eyes met, and neither spoke, both acutely aware of the tension that had been growing between them for weeks. The earlier moments of trust and confessions had shifted into something more fragile and dangerous. "You were incredible the night of the attack," Luca said finally, breaking the silence. "You stayed calm when everyone else was panicking. I couldn't have done it without you." Adriana felt warmth rise to her cheeks, a mixture of pride and something deeper she could not name. "You weren't so bad yourself," she replied softly. "You kept me safe for a heartbeat." Their hands brushed as they reached for the balcony railing, and the touch lingered just long enough to send a shiver through both of them. It was subtle, almost accidental, but in that brief contact, a spark ignited. Neither could deny the magnetic pull that seemed to draw them closer, yet both understood the risk in acknowledging it openly. The conversation turned quieter, more intimate, as they shared thoughts about fear, responsibility, and the rare moments in life when trust could be extended beyond duty. Luca leaned slightly closer, his eyes searching hers for a sign, a permission to step beyond the boundaries imposed by their families. Adriana felt her heart racing, and she realized with startling clarity that she wanted him too. A soft laugh escaped her lips when he offered a rare, gentle joke about their precarious circumstances. The sound broke some of the tension, and for the first time, they allowed themselves to exist in a space that belonged entirely to them. As the night deepened, Adriana and Luca lingered together, fully aware that every moment carried the potential for danger. The city felt distant, the world outside momentarily paused, and in the quiet of that balcony, they discovered that attraction was no longer a fleeting thought, but a palpable force. When they finally parted, it was with a shared understanding that something had shifted irrevocably. The spark had been ignited, subtle but undeniable, and both carried the memory with them like a secret flame. In a world defined by rivalry and loyalty, their hearts had begun to recognize something far more powerful and far more dangerous than either had anticipated. Chapter 5. Lines crossed. City was quieter than usual that night, but the calm was deceptive. Adriana sat in her father's office, the soft glow of the desk lamp illuminating the edges of documents she could barely focus on. Her thoughts were consumed by Luca Romano. Their encounters had grown more frequent, more meaningful, yet each meeting carried the weight of risk. Tonight, however, risk had a sharper edge. A message arrived through discreet channels, one that made her pulse quicken with both fear and resolve. A member of Luca's family was in danger, trapped by circumstances that could lead to death if no intervention came. The problem was clear. Helping him meant acting against her own family's interests. Adriana paced the room, her mind racing. Loyalty had always been the cornerstone of her life, the principle her father drilled into her from a young age. Yet the thought of Luca in peril made that loyalty feel conflicted, almost impossible to follow without compromise. Luca, unaware of the message, was moving through his own network of contacts, his instincts sharpening. He sensed danger approaching. When Adriana found him, it was in the abandoned warehouse where shadows clung to every corner. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange, both understood the moral line that was about to be crossed. "We have no choice," Adriana said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "If we don't act now, it won't end well." Luca studied her, the tension in his jaw betraying his concern. "You know what this means," he said quietly. "It could destroy everything between us, maybe even put your family against you." "I know," she replied, taking a step closer, "and I'm willing to risk it." Together, they devised a plan, each detail carefully calculated. The night was filled with quiet strategy and tense preparation. Every movement had to be precise. Every decision carried consequences. As they worked side by side, their connection deepened. Trust was no longer theoretical, it was proven in action, in the willingness to put everything on the line for each other. When the moment came, they executed their plan flawlessly, moving through the shadows with synchronized precision. The danger was immediate and palpable, but they navigated it together, their bond strengthening with every narrow escape and whispered instruction. After the crisis passed, they found themselves alone in the aftermath, breathless and exhilarated. Luca reached for her hand, and this time neither pulled away. Their eyes met, and the gravity of their shared actions hung in the air. "You risked everything," Luca said, his voice low and earnest. "I would do it again," Adriana replied, her gaze unwavering. "For you." In that moment, lines were crossed not just morally, but emotionally. Loyalty, fear, and family allegiance had collided with desire, trust, and the beginnings of love. Neither could deny the depth of their feelings. Yet both knew the danger was far from over. The choices they made tonight had consequences, and the world around them would not forgive easily. As they parted for the night, each carried the weight of what had been done, and the quiet knowledge that their hearts were entwined in ways neither could ignore. The lines had been crossed, and there was no turning back. Chapter 6. Hearts in the Crossfire City erupted in chaos as rival factions clashed in the streets, the sharp echo of gunfire and shouted orders cutting through the night. Adriana crouched behind the cold stone of an alleyway, her pulse racing. She tried to assess the scale of the attack. She had expected tension between their families, but this level of violence was unprecedented. Every instinct screamed for caution, yet every thought was drawn to Luca Romano, the man who had become more than an ally to her. Luca appeared at the alley entrance, moving with controlled precision through the chaos. His eyes met hers instantly, and in that glance, a silent acknowledgement passed between them. They were in this together, no matter the danger. Adriana felt her stomach twist with fear and something deeper, something intoxicating. As he approached, the gunfire drew closer, and they moved quickly, ducking behind overturned crates and abandoned vehicles. Each moment was a delicate dance of survival, their trust in one another absolute. They spoke in clipped whispers, coordinating silently, their movements synchronized as if by instinct. Every glance, every touch carried unspoken meaning, a reminder that in the midst of war, their bond had become both a strength and a vulnerability. A sudden explosion rocked the street ahead, sending debris scattering and forcing them to press themselves to the ground. Adriana's hand found Luca's without conscious thought, their fingers intertwining for a brief but grounding connection. In that instant, the danger faded just enough for a fleeting heartbeat of awareness. They could not remain hidden from their feelings any longer. After narrowly escaping the immediate threat, they found refuge in an abandoned building on the outskirts of the district. The dim light revealed the fatigue etched into their faces, but also the quiet relief that they were still together. For a moment, they allowed themselves to breathe, to acknowledge the emotions that had been building beneath the surface. "Adriana," Luca said, his voice steady but low, "we can't keep pretending this isn't happening. What we feel, it's dangerous, but I can't ignore it anymore." Adriana swallowed hard, her heart pounding. "I feel it too," she admitted softly. "Every time we survive, every time we face this chaos together, it only gets stronger." The tension between them was electric, a mixture of fear, desire, and urgency. They drew closer, aware that every second carried risk, yet unable to resist the pull toward one another. In the shadowed quiet of the room, their eyes met and held, the outside world momentarily forgotten. But the danger was far from over. A noise from outside reminded them that the city had not paused for their emotions. They could not linger in safety for long, yet the bond that had deepened in the crossfire was undeniable. Each touch, each shared glance, was a promise that no matter what awaited them, they were linked in ways that neither family nor circumstance could fully sever. As they parted for the night, the stakes felt higher than ever. Their hearts were exposed in a world that demanded caution, and the consequences of discovery loomed over them. Yet for the first time, they understood that some risks were worth taking, and some connections were worth fighting for, even in the midst of a relentless war. Chapter 7. Forbidden's affections united settled into a tense quiet, but neither Adriana nor Luca could find rest. Their bodies ached from the day's chaos, yet their minds were caught in a whirlwind of unspoken emotions. In the hidden corner of an abandoned safe house, the dim glow of a single lamp cast soft shadows across their faces, revealing exhaustion, worrying, and something far more intimate. Adriana sat close to the window, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Yet she could feel Luca's presence beside her like a magnetic pull. He leaned against the wall, his gaze fixed on her in a way that made her pulse quicken. Every look, every subtle movement, spoke louder than words. They had survived chaos together, trusted each other in moments when neither could trust anyone else. And that trust had grown into something fragile and dangerous: desire. Finally, Luca spoke, his voice low and hesitant. "I shouldn't feel this way. I know what it means. The consequences if anyone knew." Adriana looked up at him, her heart fluttering. "I know. I feel the same. And yet, I can't stop thinking about you." Their eyes met, and the world outside seemed to fade into silence. Slowly, cautiously, Luca reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Adriana's face. The touch was gentle but deliberate, sending a shiver through her. She did not pull away. Instead, she leaned slightly into his hand, her heart thrumming in anticipation and fear. The first kiss was tentative, soft, and almost whispered. It carried the weight of every unspoken word, every stolen glance, and every shared danger that had brought them to this moment. It was a kiss born of necessity and longing, a quiet rebellion against the rules that bound them. They pulled back slightly, foreheads resting together, breathing mingling in the dim light. "This is dangerous," Adriana whispered, her voice trembling. "I know," Luca admitted, "but I can't pretend anymore. I can't hide what I feel for you." The safe house became their private world, a fragile sanctuary where danger existed only at the edges. Every brush of hands, every lingering gaze, deepened the bond that had begun in shared fear and trust. They explored the tenderness of their connection cautiously, aware that the outside world could shatter it at any moment. Yet in each other's presence, they found a rare and intoxicating freedom. Hours passed in a quiet intimacy, a careful dance of emotions and touches, each moment a rebellion against the expectations and enmities of their families. In the shadow of violence and chaos, Adriana and Luca discovered that love, even when forbidden, could flourish in secret. As dawn approached, they separated reluctantly, hearts heavy with longing and the awareness that every stolen moment carried immense risk. The night had changed everything. Their affections were no longer subtle or hidden. They were real, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. In a world of power and danger, they had found each other, and the connection was stronger than fear, stronger than loyalty, stronger than any rule their families could impose. Chapter 8. Betrayal and trust. Morning sunlight barely touched the edges of the city streets as Adriana woke with a sense of unease. The safe, quiet moments she had shared with Luca felt distant under the shadow of a new threat. Rumors of betrayal had begun to circulate within her father's empire, whispers of someone leaking information to the Romano family. The words alone made her chest tighten, knowing that in their world, betrayal often meant death, Luca arrived at the estate that evening, his expression guarded. He had news that unsettled her even further. "Someone from your inner circle is feeding intel to my family," he said quietly. "It's bad, Adriana. We can't afford mistakes right now." Her stomach sank. The very walls of loyalty that had once protected her now felt like a trap. She had always believed she could trust her family implicitly, but now that belief was shattered. She struggled to reconcile the world she had known with the reality of the danger pressing closer to them. "We have to trust each other," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "Even if it means going against everything we've been taught." Luca studied her carefully, reading the determination in her eyes. "I do trust you," he said, reaching for her hand. "But you have to promise me nothing comes between us. Not fear, not family, not betrayal." Adriana nodded, squeezing his hand in silent agreement. The weight of the promise pressed on them both, but it also strengthened the fragile bond they had built. They began to strategize, identifying the weak links in their respective families, while keeping each other close, learning to rely on trust in a world that demanded suspicion. The betrayal hit sooner than expected. A trusted associate attempted to sabotage one of Luca's operations, putting both families at risk. Adriana and Luca acted swiftly, neutralizing the threat and protecting their people without revealing their growing closeness. Each decision tested their courage, loyalty, and the depth of their bond. By the end of the night, they found themselves alone in a quiet room, adrenaline fading and leaving behind a raw intimacy. "We did it," Luca murmured, exhaustion softening the intensity in his eyes. Together, Adriana leaned against him, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability. "Together," she echoed, their hands intertwined, hearts beating in sync. In a world built on deception, this rare moment of absolute trust became their anchor. Despite the lingering danger, despite the betrayals, and the threats from every corner, Adriana and Luca knew that they could depend on each other. Their connection had been forged through fire, tested by betrayal, and proven stronger than fear. In each other, they had found not only love, but an unwavering sanctuary. Yet the world outside their shared trust remained merciless. The choices they had made could not be hidden forever, and the consequences of loyalty and love were waiting just beyond the walls of safety. Chapter 9. The ultimate choice. Its city was alive with tension, a palpable energy that pressed against every wall and shadow. Adriana sat in her father's private office, her fingers tracing the edge of a glass of water she did not touch. News had come that a rival faction had escalated their plans, and a final confrontation was inevitable. The information was clear. Either loyalty to her family or love for Luca would demand a sacrifice that could change everything. Her thoughts were a storm. Every lesson her father had instilled, every expectation of loyalty and duty, clashed violently with the emotions that had grown between her and Luca. She knew the risks of choosing love. Both of their families would see it as a betrayal. Yet the thought of abandoning him, of pretending their bond did not exist, felt unbearable. Meanwhile, Luca moved through the city with a quiet determination, gathering intelligence and coordinating with his closest allies. Every decision he made was guided by the same impossible question: how could he protect the woman he loved without igniting a war that could destroy them both? His heart and his duty were at war, and there was no clear path to safety or victory. When they finally met in the abandoned warehouse that had become their secret refuge, the air was thick with anticipation. Their eyes met, and in that moment, words were unnecessary. They understood that this meeting would demand the ultimate choice: to follow their hearts or submit to the unyielding expectations of family. "We can't pretend anymore," Adriana said, her voice steady but edged with fear. "This is it, Luca. Everything we've done, every moment we've shared, it comes down to this." Luca stepped closer, his hands brushing hers in a tentative but grounding touch. "I know," he replied, "and no matter what, I'll face it with you." The decision was agonizing. They discussed every possibility, weighing danger against desire, duty against love. Every option carried consequences, and yet the only choice they could make together was to trust in the connection that had been forged through fire, danger, and countless shared moments. Finally, they chose each other. It was not a decision free of fear or cost. They knew that revealing their bond could ignite fury, betrayal, and bloodshed. Yet in that choice, there was clarity and courage, a recognition that love had the power to redefine even the harshest rules of their world. As the night stretched around them, they held hands and shared a quiet embrace, the world outside momentarily suspended. In that moment, their hearts beat in unison, and they understood that no matter what happened next, they had made the choice that mattered most. The ultimate test had come, and they had met it together. Secrets would be revealed, alliances challenged, and danger would not vanish. But Adriana and Luca now faced it as one. Their love had become both their shield and their risk, a force strong enough to defy the world, but fragile enough to be threatened at any moment. Chapter 10. Whispers of love. The first light of dawn crept over the city, casting a soft glow over streets that had known too much violence and fear. Adriana stood at the edge of the estate's terrace, the cool breeze brushing against her face. The events of the past days weighed heavily on her, yet there was a quiet strength in her chest, a resilience born of the choices she had made. Luca appeared beside her, his presence steady and comforting. No words were needed. Their hands found each other naturally, fingers intertwining with the ease of familiarity and shared struggle. They had faced fire, betrayal, and the impossible expectations of their families, yet they had emerged together, scarred but stronger. "I never imagined we'd make it here," Adriana murmured, her eyes searching his. "Neither did I," Luca replied, his voice soft but firm. "But I knew we had to try, and we did." The city below hummed with life, oblivious to the quiet triumph that unfolded above it. They stood together in silence, the bond between them unspoken yet undeniable. Every trial they had endured, every stolen glance and whispered confession, had led to this moment of fragile peace. As the sun rose higher, it illuminated not only the streets but also the path they had carved for themselves. They knew the challenges were not over. The world around them remained dangerous and unpredictable, yet the knowledge that they could face it together made every risk bearable. Love had become their refuge, their shield, and their guiding light. Luca drew Adriana closer, resting his forehead against hers. "We've survived everything, Adriana, and now we can finally be free to be us, whatever that means." A smile tugged at her lips, a mixture of relief, hope, and tenderness. "We'll figure it out together," she whispered. In the quiet of the morning, they let themselves savor the peace, the closeness, and the warmth of being together. The whispers of love that had begun amidst danger and secrecy flourished openly in the safe space they had created. In a world defined by power, loyalty, and conflict, Adriana and Luca had discovered the rarest treasure, a love that could endure even in the darkest times. As they gazed out at the city, hand in hand, both knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but it was theirs to walk together, and in that shared certainty, they found a quiet, unshakable happiness, the kind that whispers of love can bring, even in a world ruled by war.